Biography of sainted rapper Nipsey Hussle, The Marathon Don't Stop by famed hip-hop biographer Rob Kenner reveals a stunning story that a Trinidadian civil engineer turned photographer named Dexter Browne may have been the critical mentor in the transformation of Nipsey into the conscious radical force he is lionized as today. Dexter's role in Nipsey's formation had been completely excised from the history until now. Browne's conscious intervention in gang culture as a middle-class Howard University educated engineer and its resulting in the formation of the icon Nipsey Hussle and the creation of a multi-million-dollar alternative multimedia industry. It showed the incorporation of black cooperative economics and the African diaspora, along with Caribbean subversive influence. Just giving you a little insight. And before we go to the man who's with me, we have a little clip to play from an interview here, just so you would have an idea about this man.
We have a lot to cover. I have, again, I'm trying to balance like a conversation versus my academic talking points, but I have about six I want to try and go over. And
let's go.
It can be somewhat swayed to the communication side, but I'll try to bring the other scholars, back in, and they can feel free to jump in. But I'll just go over those points and then get back into the meat of each of those things that I want to cover.
Cool.
So I'll start off with the first point in terms of the value of relationships. And one in particular which stands out in the book is a character, a person I should say, you mentioned in detail in this chapter on the hood. And that's Dexter Browne. And it struck me as a very important conversation to have because Dexter has a connection to Howard, and it just shows you the reach of Howard and some of the things that we're talking about today. So if you want to share a little bit about that, and as you're talking, the points that I have, if I see a connection, I'll just jump in and ask you one or two questions about that, and then we can keep the program moving.
Absolutely. And I believe Dexter Browne may have joined us in the Zoom conversation. I was in touch and made sure that he knew about this. But Dexter Browne is one of the wonderful voices who trusted me to tell their story in my book.
All right, Dexter, I know we back some memories here for you. So Dexter, how did you meet this?
And so every so often I would be shooting some of my clients in the streets or somewhere around, and I would run across some of the young men that would walk through the neighborhood, and of course one of them was Ermias, who tried to sell me some burned copies of Fruity Loops and Photoshop, and I actually bought them, and I thought he was just a clever young kid. And later on I learned that the place where they would make their music was coming to an end. The lady was going to move back to Atlanta, and then that would sort of terminate all of their aspirations at that point. And so I went and visited where they would create, and I saw some young men that truly fascinated me, and they deep respect for each other and everything. And so I had a media situation going on with the photography and things, so I decided to merge forces with them, and they became part of what I call Butter Vision. And it was Ermias and quite a number of his other partners, Rallo Styles, who was actually a producer on the last Victory Lap album, and Kazi Capone, who's a very well-known artist now. And so we got together and we created a creative camp where we would be able to cross-pollinate all of our energies, and we had a fantastic time. We created Slauson Boy Volume 1, the BV Boys mixtape, and Beats and Babes, some of the DVD projects that I did. But the whole purpose of the exercise was for us to create our own intellectual property at Ground Zero, where we lived, and be able to distribute that directly to our own environment. And then in so doing, I suppose, F the middleman, which was the mantra of our movement at that time. And of course, Nipsey would go on to embody that energy
Well,
that mantra even more so.
I know we have a clip here of a very young Nipsey, a very young Nipsey. Tell us a little bit about that, because he lived with you. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, of course, when they first started coming, he would just spend a lot of time there until his mom actually showed up and was trying to find out where her son was spending all this time. And of course, we introduced ourselves, showed what we were doing, and we got her blessing. And so he really started almost working 24/7.
So let's have a look at that clip. This is a clip of a young Nipsey Hussle. All right. Sorry,
Nipsey yet.
Sorry, forgive me. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Never yet. So let's have a look at it.
Butter bitch, what up, Dad?
Sure.
Smoking on a purple sack, you jumped off the homies giving me daps, cause you the most beautiful, from your face to your cuticles. I'm saying, what's it really gonna take for you to know I'm young and I got places that I wanna go.
Welcome back. So here's Nipsey with your daughter.
Yes, Lexi actually teaching her to play the MPC,
Right.
which was a staple of all of their songs and things, and that's actually again working on his first album, Slauson Boy Volume 1. But it's a really classic piece of clip where he starts reading from a book, but then he dropped the pad and just went free. And but it really shows you his skill, you know.
Wow. Oh, so he was very close to you, Dexter.
No one had occupied a space like that in my heart before him. And I had no kids at the time, and they were my kids. We did everything that we could to facilitate their rise and their progress, because we understood that, particularly with Nipsey, he was a profound human being that must have had some kind of a special mission, and so we saw ourselves as curators of his soul, and we did our part up until 2007.
When you would have left there and you left him, what did you expect?
Well, when I left, he was fully immersed in gang culture, something that I wasn't particularly excited about.
Yeah.
And so, but we understood his talent and his value and the training that he had gone through, and so we knew that he would find his way to the top. Whatever way it was, he would find his way to the top. But there would be some drama along the way. And I had 3 daughters to raise, and so I kind of returned to Trinidad.
When you look at his life and the way it evolved, and when it was announced that he died, it seemed to create such a havoc among many sporting personalities, particularly in the NBA and on other areas, which showed that he had a major impact, obviously.
Absolutely. Nipsey's music is a very strong source of inspiration for a lot of professional athletes who are able to connect with what he's saying. He's also a rapper's rapper, and so someone like a Dre or a Drake, Wiz Khalifa, that's the rapper they would listen to. And so, he occupied, a strong place in a lot of important people's hearts. And of course, his community service was what really set him apart, was the fact that he would invest literally 100% of all of his profits back into his own neighborhood, and was able to employ several people on several levels, and open a STEM building and a co-op, Vector 90. And so Nipsey embodied all of the things we always hoped would emerge from our experiment, and so we were very, very proud of that and his achievements.
Even though you were far away, I gather you followed still what was going on with him in terms of contact?
Always. I'm always in touch.
How was it when you got the news, obviously?
I remember being on the ground for a while, and it's certainly one of the saddest days of my life. But we were comforted, my wife and I. We were comforted by the way his life was received by the globe and everyone. And so, as sad as it was, we also took a little, solace in the fact that his memory and his work will never be forgotten.
What stands out for you the most during that time when he was directly part of your family, lived with you, was part of you, as the biography says? What stands out?
It was the time that we all lived under the mantra, F the middleman. But after Nipsey's music started getting better,
F the middleman sounds so good, but anyway,
right,
go ahead, yeah.
He believed that he was in a place where he would be signable by one of the major labels.
Yeah.
And of course I was doing work for a lot of the major labels. One was in a scope. And so I told him, hey, if you have doubts about what I'm telling you, in the fact that that's not the right place for you right now, let's just go up there and give it a try. And so we all agreed. We got a little demo package with a photo and everything ready. My wife did graphics, so she was able to put it all together. We went up there, we met with a couple executives, and we played the music, and they said it was all right, but it was a little rough for them, and they're looking for something a little softer, and they told him he had a good look, and if he put on some muscle and work with a choreographer and some dance moves. But of course this was exactly opposite to the kid that was sitting in the office there. He had grown up in the streets from as a shoe shine boy,
right,
and had seen everything possible. Had been a witness to everything, and I don't think dancing was one of the things he was looking forward to as much as he wanted to preach the word of the street and be a prophet, from it. And so it was a time we got a good laugh. When we got back, a lot of the guys fell out the chair and everything, but it prompted a very important discussion that we had about the need and the importance for us to pay attention to who we were and the things we wanted to do and become, at least until we were able to manifest it enough to get respect. And so we always sort of remember that as a pivotal moment, because of course he would go on to create a mixtape called F the Middleman, which was very historic. And but it embodied the philosophy that we felt was necessary at the time. And it's not that we think that middle people are bad people, but quite often, because of the way corporate things are set up, they extract a lot of value that they may not be adding to the process, and so they in some ways may deprive the process of its full value. When a middleman who's not an artist is taking 60% of what is coming out of your mouth, I think something is wrong with that.
Lessons for Trinidad and Tobago, you think, from this?
Lessons for the globe.
Okay.
I think, and I see some good things happening here. But what I could say is this, I think what Rubadiri Victor touched on was that a lot of times when things tip, it isn't necessarily because there was a lot of expenditure involved and a lot of resources deployed. It was because of the unique nature of what was going on. I think when my wife and I made a decision to buy a house in a depressed neighborhood of color, At the time, we could have afforded a house in several other neighborhoods that was describably better or whatever. And but we decidedly took a step back to see if we could add value to our neighborhood. And we saw a lot of great things happen, even beyond Nipsey. I mean, there's hundreds of Miguel and Eva Pickford and Gabrielle Union and all of these people that passed through our house on their way to the top. But we felt that it was just that sort of connection, that intimate connection, where people understood that there was somebody who cared and respected and was taking note of the horrors that was occurring in Hollywood. I would get horror stories from my clients, and we felt that there was need for something, and they said there's always room for a new idea, and so that's why we created Buttervision.
When you look back at what would have transpired, obviously, from a Trinidad and Tobago perspective, how can we use some of the music talent that we might have right now that might be out there, underutilized, underappreciated, maybe that's the word I should use as well, underappreciated, and get them involved and find them?
Yes. We're the nation of the steel pan, and I think when you look at the marvelous nature of that invention, it speaks wonders to what is possible from the youth of Trinidad and Tobago. But as I think I touched on it with your wife, I think we need to strongly look at some alternative forms of education. I think there are a lot of people who believe, and I know that Nipsey is a very intelligent human being, but he was only formally schooled up until he was 14. All of the education that would come to him beyond that came from the village, from the people around him, from the books that he could put his hands on. And so I think that if we start looking at some alternative programs, some of which I am hoping to get involved in at ground level, where we can go in and touch some of these families with things like drum machines and keyboards, and not necessarily a math and an English book, even though that is very necessary also. But sometimes the trigger is not that, and the alternative thing triggers things that would bring all of that into play, because once Nipsey got a lot of the things he wanted in front of him, he started connecting and reading and doing things in a way, getting interested in engineering and things like that, things that he would have probably never had an interest in. And so we just need to look at the triggers, and some of the triggers could be things that we might not imagine.
We have some memories for you, a picture of him. The name Nipsey Hussle, how did he get that name?
Well, it's a derivative from Nipsey Hussle, who was a famous comedian who was also able to make a lot of money and was, they said he had a lot of game, right? Nipsey Hussle. And he was able to go on stage with Jay Leno and a lot of the greats and things like that. And so it was a derivative. You know, the guy, the president of Epic, when he heard the name Nipsey Hussle, he said, sign him. I don't need to hear the music. He said, that's genius. I don't need to hear the music, just sign him. Right? And so it just speaks wonders. Of course,
he came up with that name?
No, he did not. Gooch, who is a dear friend of mine, he still lives in my house in LA, in the same spot where we did all of this. He's also a Crip that was older than Nipsey. The three of us were talking about Nipsey's name, and we were just throwing around a couple names, but nothing stuck. And then Gooch said he would spend some time, think about it, and come back to it. And then he came back the next day and he just said Nipsey Hussle, and there was no discussion about it. That was it, and it just went literally from to Nipsey. And I actually have the day where he was and then the next day he's Nipsey.
That wasn't a name to go forward with.
I thought it would have been Big E or something, right? But I think in retrospect, the choice of the name was genius. Gooch explained to me that he was in his bed and he just woke up and he heard Nipsey Hussle. And so he didn't question it or anything. He just remembered it and gave it to Nipsey. And Nipsey, when he received it, said, look, let me just dwell on it a bit. And before he knew it, it was it had stuck.
How have you lived knowing your involvement was so much with such an internationally recognized young man, and you've been able to live with that and keep it such a good secret for a while? Keep that I'm sorry to break a secret, but I know you have tried to keep it such a secret. How have you lived with that, Dexter?
With mixed feelings. There were times when it was good, and at times when it didn't feel that good. But I am very, very appreciative of the opportunities I had. I had an opportunity to meet people I grew up looking at on television, and I never imagined I would share that.
But you've come back to Trinidad and Tobago, and unlike most, and I make no apologies, unlike most people from Trinidad and Tobago, you've returned and not come back to Trinidad and Tobago boasting about it. You've just come back and settled into your life with your family and continue to coach and continue to look after people.
Well, I have work to do here, and so because I did work there, I think it put even more pressure on us, our family, to be able to deliver some of the results we did in Los Angeles in ground.
But I know, but what I'm saying is that's unlike most Trinidad and Tobago citizens who go.
No, well, Van Gogh told us about praise and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And
you're quoting some really good.
When there's a time for acknowledgements and things like that. But I think he said that
have a young man who wants to.
Van Gogh said to leave it alone. You'd probably do your best work.
He's a young guy, so he needs to learn. So they can tell him.
Yes. You know.
All right.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
I thought you would have known.
The links. Somebody other links, but I wanted to clarify here today. And there's always exceptions.
But it's one of many great schools, because as I said,
there's always exceptions at Fatima. So it's allowed today, and today I allow it.
Fatima.
Yes, today I allow it.
It is a great institution that
All right, Dexter. I'll leave it there for time. But as we look to the future and we look at what could happen in Trinidad, you and your wife and your family have been so instrumental in being involved in and appreciating all of the areas of that, as the case may be. It is also important for us to maybe, even in death, understand that life there was still a lot of achievement, and there's breeze.
Absolutely. We have a lot to achieve. I was talking to Rob Kennan.
Yes.
The
famous.
They talk a lot about Chicago, right? Our crime rate is several times higher than Chicago's. And if Trinidad's crime rate was at where Chicago's is, we might think we won the war on crime. And they're thinking they're losing the war on crime. There's a lot of work to be done.
What we're going to find a lot of the times is that there are going to be instances where there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations.
There are, and I take no pride in what I have to see in the newspapers every day, but I feel like there are some very effective solutions that I've seen play out on the ground in different places, and I think if we are able to get some of that stuff done, we can tip the culture in a different direction. I do believe that.
What would you like to see done?
I'm sorry?
What would you like? What would you, Dexter, given all your experience,
I would like to see the young people, the marginalized people of my country and of the world, to realize their full trajectory as human beings on the planet. It is very hurtful to think of someone coming on this planet. I mean, just imagine what it would take to get on this planet, to win the greatest swimming race in the world, to get to that egg and become a human. There must be a profound place for you here on the planet. And so I think it should be the work of everyone who has been fortunate to find a place in the world of those who are not. And we would see a better place for everybody, for both sides.
For Dexter Browne, civil engineer, swimming coach, involved in construction, involved in music, involved in photography. which one stands out the most for you?
They all do. I'm a Renaissance man.
Okay.
And so, like Gordon Parks, somebody he silently mentored me. Right. I think we have different compartments in our brain for a reason. And I believe that the true collective experience on this earth will come when you're able to combine all of those faculties. And so I'm hoping that math and art and things like that, they start teaching them together and not compartmentalize them the way they do. You know, I was telling someone I got into art later on in my life. But once I did, I was able to go back and look at a lot of the math, the calculus that I was working on. It would have been a lot easier if I had done it in conjunction with art. Yes.
If you had to change something, if you had to go back in time and maybe, this is a tough one, and talk to Nipsey Hussle before you left in 2007, what further advice could you have given him? Is there anything?
Well, I don't want to second guess what he did, right, because what he did touched the planet, yeah, and in a positive way. And he won the Global Impact Award, and so I just wish he did not have to pay the price of his life for it. I just wish that, but I'm not going to second guess a young man like that has moved the world in a way that few will. He had a plan, he exercised his plan, but it looks as though God also had a plan for him. And I am just thankful that we're able to gain strength in his memory.
I know we have some more pictures, some more photos. We have some other things, Browne, we can put up on the screen as well we continue to this talk more.
That was a picture of him hustling in front of the store he would later buy.
Wow.
That was the Marathon store. It was a little fish.
Okay.
They would sell fried fish and stuff there. So that was him standing there. I like when he's coming back into the
So that's how the autobiography got his name, the Marathon?
No, well, they formed that name on their own.
Okay.
There was a project that we worked on called the Journey of 1,000 Miles.
Right.
But the Marathon was a brand that they developed once I left.
Okay, fine.
But it kind of symbolized that,
right,
that sort of eternal struggle. You know?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. That was him in the back house that he would come to rent. Because once he turned 18, he had a girlfriend, and,
right,
and she had 2 kids, and he came
right
to me and he said, look, I want to do the man thing, and I want to rent and
right
be there. And so that was him having some chicken wings and pancakes. That's actually a favorite.
Chicken wing and pancakes?
Pancakes, a big thing in
wow,
LA, yeah. On waffles or anything like that. And so, but truly just a charismatic figure that would have you laughing, but he would also leave you with some words of wisdom, you know.
Some interest, a lot of interest. As you go, again, I'm going to ask you, because of the time, obviously, in terms of a message to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Believe in yourself. Believe that the same things that you saw on television that was achieved in Los Angeles, the impact, is possible here. We were part of it. And we can engineer the same type of solutions here on our soil that our people so desperately need. And that is my message to them. I just hope to be able to get involved more with projects that could speak to that.
Have you been in contact with people in Trinidad and Tobago? Have people contacted you?
Well, yes, through the sports company, of course, speak to people like Shabazz and some of the different people who are in the different communities.
Jamal?
There. Yes.
Jamal Shabazz, yes.
Yes. And my photography would take me into different environments where I'm able to talk with many of the community leaders and things like that. Whether as a photographer or as an engineer.
But what you still see, Dexter, as the way that you could maybe break ground with some of these young men who...
They right now don't have a mechanism to convert their life experiences into assets. And so we need to provide platforms for them to do that. I think the ZESA movement is indicative of some of the relief mechanisms that these young people are embracing.
Are they misunderstood by us?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very easy to perhaps get caught up in some of the profanity and some
The
of
language.
the language and things like that. And obviously, as a grown up and as a coach, there is a level of resistance that I have to some of that. But the bigger picture there is the fact that these young people are being resourceful, and they are engineering their own relief mechanism. Because when you look at what they have as their life experience, there's not a whole lot that they could sing about beyond what they're singing about now. But I think us in the private sector, the public, need to meet them with that challenge, and so that it could complete the process. It's not complete.
Have you rapped? Have you? I mean,
I
must ask you that as we go.
No.
I mean, when you're wrong, Nipsey Hussle, people will say, "How come you Dexter can't rap?"
On Slauson Boy Volume 1, I am on the intro with Nipsey.
What song that is?
Wrap It Up is
Wrap
the
It
name
Up.
of the song, yeah.
Okay, so you on the intro. It's a pity if you had told me before, we'd have found that song. What did you
I'm
Wrap
glad
It Up?
that I didn't mention
If you had
that
only
before.
told me before, I would have
because,
found that song. Right? Wrap It Up.
Wrap It Up is the name of the song, and it's Nipsey and I talking about, he's pretending to purchase some goods, and he needed somebody with my kind of, I suppose, sound and voice to make it authentic in LA. So yeah, I did that.
And now that you've returned, as I said, you've been here for as you say, going on 13 and 14 years. Would Dexter Browne be willing to go into the trenches and see what can be done, given the experience, the fact that a lot of people in this country, a lot of the artists obviously would understand Nipsey Hussle, and they would love to meet Dexter Browne and hear some of your stories.
Andrea, I'm in the trenches already
Okay.
with the people.
Yeah.
As a photographer and as an engineer and things like that. I've just completed a book on Point Kumana, La Hawkett area, Carenage, of which the community has to be the primary stakeholder and recipient.
How is that going?
Very good. I completed it, but I'm in the process of putting it together now, and I'm hoping that some of the stuff that's going on.
What did you find? Give us a synopsis. Any synopsis?
I just find that well, there are highs and lows, but it's just a wonderful energy and spirit that most of these people would not have seen themselves in magazines or seen themselves published. And so this was a first step in helping them to understand their own intellectual property as people in the environments. The pigeons, the cats, everything has a visual component of value that we're able to convert. The pit bulls, everything. And so I taught the guys in LA how to do it.
Right.
And I'm beginning to teach the people here how to do it.
And interesting you choose that area, because that area has also produced a number of Trinidad and Tobago's leading footballers and sportsmen.
Yes,
have
absolutely.
come from that particular area.
Absolutely. And there's some swimmers coming out of that area now. Keegan Ford, who's at Howard University, captain of the swim team, MVP honors. And there's a young talent by the name of Brandon Balfour that is coming out. He's been with Flying Fish for a little while now, but we have some big hopes for him. So the area is continuing to produce that. But once the people understand their own value, the path becomes a little different. And I think when we started in Los Angeles, I mean, they didn't understand the value of Crenshaw and Slauson from a branding standpoint. Yes. They saw it as their home, but they didn't understand that they would be able to leverage it, their own environment, for their own rise. And I think when you look at the interesting nature of a lot of these urban environments, they have the power to convert their life experiences into gold. And the book that I shot is really from the people. I was just a witness.
So we can look forward to that. But we still want you to be more involved.